Chapter 2: The Desperate Global Summit. One day before Prometheus broke Earth's orbit, beneath the frosted glass dome of the United Human Alliance Hall, the most exhausted faces in world politics gathered one final time. There was no grandeur left, no trace of a golden age. From the Pacific Bloc representative to the chair of the Afro-Asian Council, from the head of the Pan-European Federation to the ambassador of the Arctic Union, all wore semi-formal protective suits, minimalist uniforms with discreet air filters embedded at the collar, a silent testament to an Earth that had become suffocating and poisoned. A dry electronic voice crackled from the speakers, commencing final session of the Global Summit. Topic: Exodus Initiative and a Declaration of Sovereign Power Renunciation. The air was so cold that the delegates' breaths floated in thin, ghostly plumes. At the central podium stood an aging man, back straight, face weathered, but unyielding Supreme Commander of Exodus, a figure who embodied the last vestige of centralized global authority. "We have failed," he began, his voice hoarse and heavy. "None of our previous resolutions could halt the unraveling. Desertification has swept across the Asia-Pacific continent. Melting ice has buried every coastal city, and what we once called fertile plains are now just gray dust." His gaze moved slowly across the room, searching perhaps in vain for even a flicker of hope in the gaunt, hollow-eyed faces before him. But silence was all that answered. "And so," he continued, "we must place our final bet. The Exodus Initiative Prometheus will leave Earth not merely as a scientific mission, but as the final representative of all of us, of every civilization that has ever lived on this planet." From below the dais, a female delegate from the Amazonian bloc stood up. Her voice trembled, yet it held a sharp steel edge. "Supreme Commander, if that ship fails, who will carry Earth's final message? Who will tell the universe that humanity once lived, once loved, once fought?" Another voice rose older from the Saharan Federation. "Or perhaps placing all our hopes on a single ship is humanity's last act of arrogance?" These weren't protests anymore. They were raw despair. A shared confession, the final words of a species signing its own death sentence. The commander closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, his voice ragged. "We no longer have any choice. These summits are ceremonial now. As of this moment, supreme authority no longer rests with any government. It belongs to Prometheus." He raised a hand. A young officer stepped onto the stage. Jaxon Reeve, not yet clad in the Prometheus command uniform, only a dark long coat over his shoulders. His expression was eerily calm. "Captain Jaxon Reeve," the commander announced, "from this moment forward, every decision you and the crew of Prometheus make will be the sole voice of humanity." The lights of the assembly hall caught in Jackson's storm-gray eyes, eyes that had witnessed the Sydney collapse of 2163, where his family was lost forever. There was no blind hope left in them, only the weight of a responsibility no one else dared to carry. He bowed his head slightly, his voice low and steady. "I accept." And thus, the desperate global summit came to an end, in silence. After Jaxon Reeve's acceptance, the hall grew as quiet as a mass grave. No applause, no words of praise, because everyone understood. That moment marked the true end of Earth's civilization, the moment when power and hope were surrendered entirely to one ship and one solitary crew. Mira Xu, seated among the delegates below, watched Jackson's figure standing alone on the high dais. She remembered the early days, when Prometheus was just a blueprint on a drafting table, when people still believed Earth could be saved with small acts, planting forests, cleansing oceans, repairing the ozone. All of it now shattered dreams. In the final segment of the summit, the Supreme Commander ordered the projection of the Exodus record, a pre-recorded video to be archived by Hermes as the official final testament of the United Human Alliance. Images flooded the giant screen, Rivers cracked at the bedrock, cities swallowed by thick gray oceans, masses wandering across scorched red deserts, and finally, collapsing underground shelters where even the last human communities could no longer sustain themselves. A low female voice spoke over the soft, solemn music. "Prometheus, if you find life, please remember, Earth was once full of it. And if you find knowledge, use it not only to save us, but to save humanity from the very mistakes that made Earth like this." The voice blurred, fading. As the final shot appeared, a lone child wearing a gas mask standing in the ruined square of Berlin, clutching a moldy green doll. All the delegates bowed their heads. No one had anything more to say. The commander silently placed a small titanium carbon case before Jaxon, the activation key to Prometheus. A simple object, but it carried more weight than any document humanity had ever signed. "Captain Reeve," the commander rasped, "with this key, you and your crew become the new global summit. From this point forward, your decisions are Earth's decisions." Jaxon bowed and accepted the case, then turned and walked away without looking back, his footsteps echoing through the central aisle, where delegates stood in two silent lines. No one raised a hand in farewell. There was no need for goodbye, because they all knew this wasn't a parting. It was a verdict. In the cold underground corridor beneath the Geneva Hall, Dr. Tomas walked beside Jaxon Reeve in silence. Flickering fluorescent lights cast jagged shadows along the cracked concrete walls, mirroring the fragile, collapsing state of Earth itself. Jaxon said nothing the entire way. His posture was straight, his step steady, but Tomas could feel the invisible weight on his shoulders, not just responsibility, but the grief of a species that had failed itself. It was Tomas who finally spoke, his voice deep and soft, like mist over a rice field at dawn. "Jaxon, what did you see in that hall?" Jaxon paused briefly. He didn't turn, but his reply came with quiet certainty. "The final fragments of a civilization that couldn't save itself." Tomas nodded slowly, but his deep-set eyes reflected an undefinable sorrow. "Do you believe humanity has reached its end? That there's no way left?" Jaxon closed his eyes for a moment. A flash of memory from the Sydney collapse swept through him. A sky burning red, dust storms ripping glass towers to shreds. His daughter's scream, swallowed beneath the rubble. His voice, when it came, was quiet, but cold. "It's not that we didn't have a way. We just refused to choose it when we still had the chance." Behind them, Mira Xu caught up, her face still flushed with emotion from the summit. She spoke quickly, breath-catching, but her voice was firm. "Jaxon, even if they didn't understand, you were right. Prometheus won't carry politics, ambition, or hate. It will carry only hope and science." Jaxon turned to her. His storm-gray eyes softened, just slightly. "Hope, Mira? You still believe in that?" Without hesitation, she replied, "I do. Because if we lose faith, then what reason do you have to step aboard that ship?" From the far end of the corridor, Alex Carter appeared, lugging a grease-stained engineering case over his shoulder. He grinned, trying to lighten the air. All right enough with the drama. As long as I keep the engines running and nobody dies, I say hope's alive and well. Right, Hermes?" Hermes responded instantly through their personal comms, his tone calm and as dry as ever. "Chief Engineer Carter, hope is a subjective variable with no quantifiable parameters. However, based on Prometheus' current configuration, technical success probability is 94.2%. Alex scoffed. "Guess I'm outperforming human hope these days." Dr. Tomas smiled faintly, but his eyes drifted, far away and reflective. "Hope is never a measurement, Alex. It's a motive force. And sometimes, the last beautiful illusion we humans still hold." They entered the elevator connecting the subterranean hall to the launch platform, where Prometheus awaited. The heavy metal doors opened with a groan, revealing a world bathed in red dust. Hongxi Launch Complex shimmered under sterile industrial lights, yet everything was cloaked in the gloom of an eternal dusk. Far in the distance, silent clusters of people stood watching. No cheers, no chants, just heavy eyes, following the ship that was about to leave them forever. Hermes chimed in over their comms, his voice this time slightly lower, with a rare, almost human timbre. "Captain, countdown continues. Time remaining, 72 hours until Prometheus exits Earth orbit." Jaxon looked up at the colossal hull of the ship. Prometheus towered above them, titanium carbon modules glinting like silver scales. Its steel frame cold, but perfect in every rivet, the final technological wonder of Earth. Mira Xu exhaled softly, clutching a small container tightly in both hands. Inside, a handful of soil from the old garden of Beijing. The only thing she brought from Earth, a green seed for whatever world might come next. Alex Carter bent down and patted the underside of the hull. "We've got this. Don't we, little Prometheus?" Hermes responded immediately with his signature deadpan wit. "Prometheus is not little, Chief Engineer Carter. It is 850 meters in length, with a full mass of 1.2 million metric tons, larger than any child ever recorded." A soft laugh echoed among the crew. It was brief, fleeting, but enough to push back the darkness for just a moment. Jaxon turned to face them all, his voice low but resolute. "We won't save anyone if we carry with us the very things that destroyed Earth. Remember this? When Prometheus leaves, we're not just representing humanity. We're representing its final chance to discover what is truly worth saving." Silence fell. No more arguments, no more hesitation. In the distance, amid the clusters of silent onlookers, a child raised a weathered sign, handwritten in uneven strokes, but perfectly clear beneath the launch pad lights. "Please don't forget us." Mira brought a hand to her mouth, eyes brimming. Jaxon lowered his head. Then he turned, and without another word, began walking toward the launch bridge that led into Prometheus. One by one, the others followed in silence. The desperate global summit was over, and the journey had begun from that very moment. A moment when humankind finally stopped debating, and all that remained were heavy footsteps, and a fragile hope that stretched beyond the stars. Hongxi Launch Complex blazed under industrial floodlights, yet the air felt colder than ever, as if Earth itself were holding its breath. The full crew of Prometheus gathered, ascending the narrow bridge of white steel, connecting the platform to the ship's massive body, a final tether between humanity and the hope waiting out there in the dark. Just hours earlier, the United Human Alliance Summit had ended in a silence so deep it bordered on sacred. No applause, no grand resolutions, only reluctant acceptance. Every surviving nation and faction had handed full authority to Jaxon Reeve and the Exodus crew. On the launch pad, the last spectators stood behind security barricades, eyes weary. Some hands rose in the air, not waving farewell, but reaching out, as if to touch Prometheus one last time. Commander Novak walked beside Jaxon, his voice a rough murmur. "Captain, perimeter security is complete. No signs of protest. But no one believes we're coming back." Jaxon nodded. He didn't need Novak to say it. He understood that doubt more than anyone. He knew that, to many, Prometheus was just an escape pod, a symbol of surrender in the face of fate. Mira Xu moved on the other side of him, clutching the small container of soil from Beijing's ancient garden, the one thing she refused to leave behind. She whispered, not to anyone in particular, "This isn't an escape. We're going to save them, even if they no longer believe." Behind them, Alex Carter swaggered forward, tool bag slung over one shoulder, his mouth curled into a half-smirk. "Ah, the big, wide universe. Let's hope it doesn't mind visitors." And let's hope Prometheus survives that first burn. Hermes, patched through the platform's external audio system, interjected his neutral male voice as calm and dry as ever, tinged with just the right amount of sarcasm. Chief Engineer Carter, the probability of Prometheus surviving initial thrust is 99.3%. However, the probability of you surviving increases significantly if you remember to fasten your seatbelt. A quiet ripple of laughter passed through the launch technicians, the men and women who had spent the last 3 years building this massive ship. Now they had only laughter left as their final farewell. At the final staging point, Jaxon came to a halt and turned to face the entire crew. The floodlights caught on their sleek black and silver uniforms, each chest bearing the insignia of the Exodus Initiative. Prometheus holding the flame of DNA. His voice was deep, not loud, but it carried clearly through the external PA system. We are not leaving to escape. We are leaving to preserve the last shred of human dignity that still remains. He paused for a breath. Prometheus is not just a ship. It is a home, and the last fire of hope Earth has left. No one spoke, no one needed to. Then Jaxon was the first to step onto the narrow bridge, walking directly into Prometheus. A soft wind swept across the launch pad, stirring fine red dust into the air, as if the dying civilization of Earth itself were bidding farewell to its bravest child. Hermes spoke, this time with an oddly gentle tone. Time remaining until departure, 68 hours. Inside the ship's main habitation deck, with the crew now settled, Mira Xu placed her small container on the central table. The lid cracked open to reveal a fragile green sprout, rising from rich black soil. She gently brushed its tiny leaves and whispered, "We will begin again, somewhere." Dr. Tomas, seated beside her, folded his hands together and closed his eyes. A silent prayer. For Earth, for the crew, and for the endless journey ahead. That final night on Earth, Hongse Launch Complex lay in complete silence. No engines, no convoys, no movement. Only soft amber floodlights washed over the massive body of Prometheus, making it look less like a machine and more like a sleeping giant about to awaken and leave its mother planet behind. In the command deck, Jaxon Reeve sat alone. His storm gray eyes stared at the main display, where live external feeds cycled through images of Earth's ruins. The desert that was once the Amazon basin, a dust storm spiraling from the skeleton of Chicago City stripped of light. And Life Hermes broke the silence, his voice unusually soft, almost human. "Captain, per your request, I've compiled a map displaying 20 former landmarks of human civilization. All are now listed as irrecoverable." Jaxon gave a slight nod. He already knew. Earth was beyond repair. No technical intervention could restore it, and Prometheus was the only path forward. Just then, the command deck door slid open. Dr. Tomas entered composed as always, but with eyes that carried weight. He stood behind Jaxon for a long moment, then spoke softly, yet his voice echoed with gravity. "Do you resent them, Jaxon? Those in the summit? The people out there?" Jaxon closed his eyes, leaning back in the captain's chair. A long breath escaped him, carrying fatigue and bitterness. "I used to. A lot. But not anymore. Anger won't change anything now. There's only one thing left worth holding on to: responsibility." Tomas sat beside him, arms folded, gaze distant. "Then you understand? We're not leaving because humanity deserves saving. We're leaving because the duty itself is what makes us still worthy to exist." Jaxon turned to look at him. A faint smile touched his lips, rare and tinged with sorrow. "You always speak in ways that sound bigger than I can think." Hermes chimed in, this time with a strangely warm cadence. "Dr. Tomas does possess that talent, Captain. A philosophical subroutine, but a trustworthy one." Tomas let out a quiet chuckle. Alex Carter, leaning casually in the doorway, no one noticed when he arrived, added, "Yeah, Hermes, just don't install that philosophical subroutine into the propulsion core. It's already complicated enough. Jaxon stood, letting his gaze sweep across them. Mira Xu entered last, still holding the small container of earth soil. But this time, her eyes were ablaze with conviction. "We're ready, Captain, for tomorrow." Jaxon nodded, stepping up to the central control panel. He placed his hand on the softly glowing holographic interface. Hermes announced, in a tone both clinical and monumental, "Prometheus status confirmed. Full crew on board. All systems operational. Exodus schedule. Launch set for 0 o'clock UTC, tomorrow." No one said a word. They simply stood there, looking at each other, in a moment of strange, weightless quiet. The final moment of their presence on Earth. Even as they stood aboard the ship that had already cast off, but had not yet left, Mira stepped forward and gently placed the small green sprout on the console before Jaxon. Her voice was soft, but unwavering. "This is our promise to Earth." Tomas bowed his head, a gesture simple yet deeply reverent. Alex folded his arms, smiling faintly, but his tone had quieted. "Tomorrow we fly, and this time there's no turning back." Jaxon looked at each of them in turn, then at the Prometheus reflected on the screen. This ship was no longer just a vessel. It was a part of them. And Earth, though it would soon be left behind, still held an invisible tether to them. Duty, memory, and all their failures. Hermes spoke one last time that night, his voice gentler than ever. "Good night, Captain. Good night, crew. Rest well. On your final night on the mother planet." Tomorrow would begin a new chapter, the day Prometheus leaves Earth. Forever.